This isn't a horror movie. It's my life as a Texas school bus driver on the night shift. Prepare to be unnerved as I recount the most chilling encounters that made me question reality. You'll hear about the strange rules that govern these routes and passenger interactions that still haunt my dreams. What I experienced on those roads will make you think twice about stepping onto a bus after dark. Let me tell you something about driving a school bus in rural Texas after the sun goes down. It's nothing like the day shift. Nothing at all. When I first took the job 3 years ago, I thought a night route would be easier. Fewer kids, less traffic, maybe some peace and quiet to clear my head. I was a fool. My name is Daniel Reeves, and I drive Route 47, which winds through some of the most isolated stretches of hill country you've ever seen. We're talking about roads where your headlights are the only light for miles, where the darkness presses against your windows like something alive and hungry. The state contracts our company to transport students to and from evening programs, late sports practices, and community college classes. Sounds innocent enough, right? The first thing you need to understand is that night driving in rural Texas isn't like anywhere else. During the day, these roads are just roads. Sun-bleached asphalt cutting through scrubland and ranch country. The occasional farmhouse breaking up the monotony. But after sunset, everything changes. The landscape transforms into something primal. Something that remembers what Texas was before we paved it over and pretended we tamed it. I remember my first night clearly. It was a Tuesday in September, still hot enough that the asphalt released the day's heat in shimmering waves. My supervisor, an older woman named Rita who'd been driving these routes for 20 years, sat me down before I headed out. Her office smelled like coffee and vanilla air freshener, a comforting smell that didn't match the intensity in her eyes. "Daniel," she said, sliding a standard route map across her desk. "This is your official route. Memorize it." Then she pulled out a second map, hand-drawn on yellowed paper, covered in notes written in different colored inks. "But this is what you actually need." I laughed nervously. "What is this? Some kind of hazing ritual?" Rita didn't smile. "The rules on this map keep you safe. The rules you learned in training, those are for daytime. Night is different out here. Always has been." I should have paid more attention to the weight in her words, but I was cocky. I'd driven trucks cross-country, navigated city traffic, handled every kind of weather condition. How hard could a school bus route be? The hand-drawn map was covered in strange notations. Mile markers were circled in red with warnings scrawled beside them. "Don't stop here, even if they wave. Keep moving past the old Miller place. If you see the blue pickup truck, take the county road detour." At the bottom, in neat block letters, someone had written, "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it is." "Rita, come on. This is just some local legend stuff, right? You're messing with a new guy." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out the depot yard where the buses sat in neat rows, their yellow paint glowing orange in the setting sun. "I've lost 2 drivers on Route 47 in 20 years, Daniel. One quit after his first week and moved back to Houston. Won't talk about what happened. The other one," she paused, her reflection in the window looking older than she was. "The other one didn't follow the rules." A chill ran down my spine despite the heat. What happened to them? "He's in a care facility now. Hasn't spoken a coherent sentence in 3 years. Just sits there, staring at nothing, sometimes whispering about faces in the windows." She turned back to me. "Take the map. Follow the rules. And Daniel, if you see something you can't explain, don't try to explain it. Just drive." That conversation should have been my first clue to walk away, but I needed the job. My ex-wife had taken most of our savings in the divorce, and the night shift paid 20% more than day routes. So I took the hand-drawn map, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my clipboard alongside the official route paperwork. My first pickup was at 6:47 p.m. at the Cedar Valley Community College parking lot. 3 students, all adults returning to school for better opportunities. They climbed aboard quietly, nodded their hellos, and took seats near the middle of the bus. Normal. Ordinary. I pulled out of the lot, and headed west on Ranch Road 1323, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. By my second stop, full darkness had fallen. I mean the kind of darkness that city people don't understand. No streetlights, no glow from distant shopping centers, nothing but my headlights boring twin tunnels through the black. The stars overhead were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, so numerous they looked like someone had shattered diamonds across velvet. I picked up 4 teenagers at the high school, kids who'd stayed late for band practice. They were loud and laughing, and their energy pushed back the creeping unease I'd been feeling. Good. Normal teenager noise. I could handle that. The route took me deeper into the countryside, following narrow roads that snaked between ranches and through patches of scrub oak. My passengers gradually fell quiet as the darkness pressed closer. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw them all staring at their phones, faces illuminated by the blue glow of screens. Smart kids, creating their own light. Then I reached mile marker 23, and everything changed. The road curved sharply to the left, and as I navigated the turn, my headlights swept across something that made my breath catch. Standing at the edge of the road, right where a dirt path intersected with the pavement, was a figure, just standing there, perfectly still, facing the road. I couldn't make out details. The figure was backlit by my lights, creating a silhouette that could have been a man or woman, tall or short. What struck me was the absolute stillness. No movement, not even the slight sway you'd expect from someone standing on uneven ground. Just perfect, statue-like immobility. My foot eased off the accelerator instinctively. The bus slowed. The figure's arm began to rise, as if to wave me down. Then I remembered Rita's map. I fumbled for it with one hand while keeping my eyes on the road. There, circled in red at mile marker 23. Don't stop here, even if they wave. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pressed the accelerator, picking up speed. As the bus passed the figure, I couldn't help but glance in the side mirror. The figure had turned, tracking our movement, but still hadn't taken a single step. And there, in the mirror's reflection, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure had no face. Where features should have been was just smooth, blank darkness. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white, and kept driving. Behind me, one of the teenagers spoke up. "Mr. Reeves, did you see that person back there?" "Eyes on your phones, kids," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Sometimes people walk these roads at night. It's not our business. But I knew, even then, that what I'd seen wasn't a person. Not really. And this was only my first night on Route 47. The darkness outside my windows suddenly felt less empty and more occupied, as if the night itself was watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. The weeks that followed my first encounter should have gotten easier. They didn't. Instead, I began to notice patterns, small details that accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a river until they formed something undeniable. It started with the sounds. On a Thursday night, 3 weeks into my tenure on Route 47, I was making my usual run with a light passenger load. Just 2 college students in the middle section, both wearing headphones and lost in their own worlds. The bus was otherwise empty, or at least it should have been. I just passed the intersection at County Road 156 when I heard it. A soft scraping sound from the back of the bus, like someone dragging their fingernails across the vinyl seat covers. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see one of my passengers fidgeting, but both students were motionless, absorbed in their devices. The scraping continued, moving from left to right across the back row. Then it stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something worse, the distinct creak of someone settling into a seat. The sound was clear, unmistakable, that particular groan of springs compressing under weight, the sigh of vinyl accepting a body. My eyes locked on the rearview mirror, scanning the empty back rows. Nothing. Nobody. Just vacant seats stretching back into the dimness beyond my interior lights. "Everything okay, Mr. Reeves?" One of the students had removed her headphones. Her name was Jessica, a nursing student who rode my route 3 times a week. "You look kind of pale." "Fine," I lied. "Just thought I heard something." "The bus settling," she said with a knowing smile. "My dad used to drive 18-wheelers. He said trucks and buses are always making weird noises, especially the old ones." I nodded and forced a smile, but my bus wasn't that old. 3 years, maybe 4, and I'd driven enough vehicles to know the difference between mechanical sounds and something else. The next incident happened 2 nights later, Saturday evening, which meant a different passenger mix. I had a group of 6 teenagers heading home from a youth center program, all of them clustered in the front section where they could talk and joke. I've learned that groups like to stay together, especially on the night routes. Safety in numbers, even if they couldn't articulate what they were seeking safety from. We were traveling along a particularly desolate stretch of Ranch Road 882, a straight shot through mesquite and cactus country, when every single one of them fell silent at once. Not a gradual trailing off of conversation, but a simultaneous cessation that was almost synchronized. "Guys," I asked, watching them in the mirror, "what's wrong?" The oldest boy, maybe 16, turned to look at me. His face had gone gray. "Mr. Reeves, is someone sitting in the back of the bus?" My stomach dropped. "No." "Why?" "Because we all just saw someone walk past us toward the back. Someone in a gray coat." He looked at his friends, who all nodded in confirmation. "We all saw it, but there's nobody back there now." I pulled the bus to the side of the road, my hands shaking. This violated one of Rita's unwritten rules: never stop except at designated locations. But I needed to see for myself. I engaged the parking brake and stood, turning to face the rear of the bus. The back section was empty. The emergency exit door was closed and sealed. There was nowhere for someone to hide, no way they could have gotten off. But as I stared down the narrow aisle between the seats, I noticed something that made my skin prickle. The rear window was covered in condensation, as if someone had been breathing against it. And in that condensation, barely visible in the dim light, was the outline of a handprint. A small handprint, like a child's. "Everyone stays in their seats," I announced, trying to keep my voice calm. "We're continuing to the next stop." I returned to the driver's seat and pulled back onto the road, my mind racing. The teenagers remained silent for the rest of the journey, occasionally glancing behind them with wide eyes. When I dropped them off at their designated stop, they practically ran from the bus. I should have reported these incidents to Rita, but something held me back. Pride, maybe, or fear that she'd think I was losing my grip on reality. Instead, I started keeping a journal, documenting each strange occurrence with the clinical detachment of a scientist recording data. October brought cooler nights and something new, the ghost stops. That's what I came to call them. Locations where my bus would slow down on its own, as if responding to an unseen hand on the brake. The first time it happened, I thought I'd accidentally touched the pedal, but I checked and my foot was firmly on the accelerator. The bus decelerated anyway, coasting to a gentle stop at a seemingly random point on the road. There was nothing there. No stop sign, no intersection, no obvious reason for the bus to halt. I waited, engine idling, feeling foolish. Then, after exactly 30 seconds, I timed it. The bus lurched forward again, as if released from invisible hands. This happened 3 more times that week, always at different locations, but always following the same pattern. The bus would slow, stop, wait precisely 30 seconds, then continue. And each time, I'd feel the temperature inside the bus drop by several degrees, my breath forming small clouds in the air despite the heater running at full blast. The ghost stops bothered me more than the sounds, or even the mysterious handprint. Those could be explained away, rationalized as tricks of perception or environmental anomalies. But the bus acting with apparent intention, following a pattern I couldn't control, that suggested something with agency, something making decisions. I finally broke down and called Rita on a Wednesday evening, speaking to her from the depot before my shift. I need to talk to you about Route 47, about things that have been happening. She listened without interrupting as I described the sounds, the sightings, the ghost stops. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. You're experiencing them, she finally said. The unseen passengers. The what? Every night, driver on Route 47 encounters them eventually. Spirits, echoes, ghosts. Call them what you want. This land has memory, Daniel. Bad things have happened on these roads over the years. Accidents, disappearances, things folks don't talk about. Whatever's left behind hitches rides sometimes. My rational mind rebelled against this explanation. Rita, there has to be a logical. The logical explanation is that you're driving through haunted territory. She cut me off. The sooner you accept that, the easier it gets. They're mostly harmless, long as you follow the rules. They're just there, moving through the same space we do, but not quite connecting. Think of them as background noise. Background noise that stops my bus. They remember their stops, Rita said quietly, from when they were alive. The bus responds to that memory somehow. It's been happening for years. Just wait the 30 seconds and move on. Fighting it or trying to explain it will only drive you crazy. After that conversation, I tried to adopt Rita's pragmatic approach. I acknowledged the unseen passengers without dwelling on them. When I heard footsteps in empty aisles or felt the bus respond to invisible commands, I simply noted it and continued driving. But acceptance didn't make it less unsettling, especially on nights when I'd catch glimpses in my peripheral vision, shadows that moved wrong, shapes that appeared in one mirror and not the other, the sense of being watched by eyes I couldn't see. The worst night came at the end of October. I was driving the late run, picking up the last stragglers from evening classes. The bus was empty except for one passenger, an older woman named Margaret who taught pottery at the community college. She always sat in the same seat, right behind me, and we developed a comfortable rapport. We were chatting about her grandson's upcoming birthday when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes had fixed on something behind me, and the blood drained from her face. Margaret, what's wrong? Daniel, she whispered. Don't turn around. But there are people standing in the aisle. At least a dozen of them. They're just standing there, swaying with the motion of the bus. Every instinct screamed at me to look, but I kept my eyes forward. Describe them to me. They're not quite solid, like fog shaped like people. Some of them are looking at us. Oh God, one of them is a child. She can't be more than 7. She's wearing an old-fashioned dress. Margaret's voice cracked. Daniel, she's trying to tell me something. Her mouth is moving, but there's no sound. I gripped the wheel tighter, fighting the urge to slam the brakes. Look at me, Margaret. Don't watch them. Just talk to me. We drove the remaining 5 miles in tense silence, with Margaret occasionally whimpering as the unseen passengers moved around us. When I finally reached her stop, she practically fled from the bus, turning back only once to mouth, "I'm sorry," before hurrying to her car. She never rode my route again. That night, driving the empty bus back to the depot, I finally turned to look at the seats behind me. They were empty, but every single one bore the impression of someone sitting there, the vinyl compressed as if underweight. And in the quiet, I could swear I heard breathing, dozens of people, all inhaling and exhaling in perfect synchronization. I understood then why Rita's previous driver had ended up in a care facility. There's only so much your mind can rationalize before it starts to crack under the weight of the impossible. And I was beginning to feel those first hairline fractures in my own sanity. By November, I'd memorized Rita's hand-drawn map so thoroughly I could have redrawn it from memory. Each cryptic notation had become a vital part of my survival guide. Rules that made no logical sense, but had proven themselves accurate time and again. Never pick up hitchhikers after 10 p.m. That was rule number 1, written in heavy black ink and underlined 3 times. I'd learned why the hard way. It was a cold Tuesday night, the kind where the temperature plummets as soon as the sun sets and frost starts forming on windshields. I was running behind schedule thanks to a flat tire on one of the other depot buses that had delayed all our departures. It was 10:17 p.m. when I spotted him. He stood at the intersection of Ranch Road 1323 and County Road 72, right under the single streetlight that marked the crossroads. A young man, maybe 25, wearing a leather jacket and jeans. His thumb was out in the classic hitchhiker pose, and his breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. I slowed down instinctively. The humanitarian in me, the part raised by parents who believed in helping people, warred with Rita's rules. It was barely past 10. He looked cold. What harm could it do? My hand moved toward the door lever. Then I noticed a shadow. The streetlight was directly above him, which meant his shadow should have been a small pool at his feet. Instead, it stretched out to the side at an impossible angle, as if the light source was somewhere else entirely. And as I watched, the shadow moved independently, shifting its position while the man remained perfectly still. My hand jerked away from the door lever. I pressed the accelerator, and the bus surged forward. As I passed the hitchhiker, he turned his head to follow my movement. Even from a distance, I could see his expression shift from hopeful to angry to something worse, something predatory and ancient that no human face should contain. In my side mirror, I watched him recede into the darkness. He never moved, never walked away. He just stood there under that streetlight, and as the distance grew, I swear his form became less solid, more transparent, until he was just another shadow in the night. I radioed Rita the next morning to tell her what had happened. Her response was a tired sigh. "You saw the hitchhiker at the crossroads. Good thing you didn't stop. What is he? We don't rightly know. Been appearing at that spot for at least 30 years, always after 10 p.m. 3 drivers have picked him up over the decades. One crashed his bus into a ravine, survived, but all his passengers died. One drove off the road and into Lake Travis. They never found the bus or the driver. The third," she paused. "The third drove his route perfectly normal, dropped off his passengers, returned to the depot. But when maintenance checked the bus the next morning, they found blood all over the driver's seat and handprints on the inside of the windshield. The driver was never seen again." Jesus Christ, Rita, how is this legal? How are we allowed to operate when there are things like this out here? "Because officially, none of this exists," she said simply. "And because somebody has to drive these routes. These communities need the service. And the things out there don't bother you if you follow the rules. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. Rule number 2, always keep your high beams on, no matter what." This seemed straightforward until I encountered the deer. Except they weren't deer, not really. It was mid-November, and I was navigating a particularly winding section of road through cedar-choked hills. My high beams illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows from the twisted trees. Then in the distance I saw eyes reflecting back at me. Dozens of pairs, all at roughly the same height, all unblinking. As I drew closer, shapes resolved out of the darkness. They looked like deer at first glance. The right size, the right general shape, standing in a group at the roadside. But something was wrong with their proportions. Their legs were too long. Their necks bent at angles that natural anatomy wouldn't allow. And those eyes were set wrong, positioned on the front of their heads like a predator's rather than on the sides like prey. One of them stepped onto the road, moving with a liquid grace that was beautiful and horrible. Its head turned to face me, and in the harsh glare of my high beams, I could see its mouth. It was too wide, filled with too many teeth, and it was smiling. The thing was smiling at me. Every instinct screamed to switch to low beams, to reduce the glare, to look away from that terrible grin. But Rita's map had been explicit. High beams, always, no matter what. So I kept them on and accelerated, praying the thing would move. It didn't. It stood there, still smiling, until my bus was maybe 20 feet away. Then it dissolved. That's the only word for it. The thing simply came apart like smoke, wisps of shadow dispersing into the night air. The rest of the herd followed suit, breaking down into nothingness as my high beams swept over them. I checked the map later and found a note near that section of road. They hate the light, but they'll try to make you dim it. Don't listen. Don't look away. High beams until dawn. The rules went on and on, each one learned through careful observation or, more frighteningly, through Rita's stories of drivers who hadn't followed them. Never answer if someone calls your name from outside the bus. I learned this during a particularly lonely 2 a.m. run when I heard a woman's voice, clear as day, calling Daniel. Daniel, help me, from the darkness beyond my windows. I wanted to stop, to respond, to see who needed help. But the map said no, and I trusted the map more than my conscience by then. If you see the blue pickup truck, take the county road detour. This rule saved my life on a foggy December night. The blue truck appeared in my rearview mirror, ancient and rusted, with no visible driver. It began gaining on me, accelerating faster than any normal vehicle should. I took the detour, a narrow dirt road that added 20 minutes to my route. The truck didn't follow. Later, I learned that a bus had collided with a blue pickup on that exact stretch of road in 1987. The bus driver had survived, but barely. He claimed the truck had driven straight into him, head-on, and then vanished on impact. But the rule that haunted me most was the simplest. If something feels wrong, it is. This rule lacked the specificity of the others. It relied entirely on intuition, on that primitive part of the brain that evolved to keep our ancestors alive on the African savanna. And in late December, it proved itself in a way that still gives me nightmares. I was picking up a single passenger, a teenage boy named Jason who attended evening tutoring sessions. He climbed aboard his usual stop, gave me his usual nod, and walked toward the back of the bus. Normal. Routine. I picked up this kid dozens of times, but something felt wrong. I couldn't articulate what it was. Jason looked the same, moved the same, even wore the same ratty backpack he always carried. But my skin was crawling, my hands were trembling, and every nerve in my body was screaming at me to open the doors and tell him to get off. I trusted that instinct. Jason, I'm sorry, but I need you to exit the bus. I'm having mechanical issues. The thing that looked like Jason stopped walking. It stood perfectly still in the aisle, its back to me. Mechanical issues. Its voice was Jason's voice, but the inflection was wrong, like someone doing an impersonation without quite nailing the rhythm. Yes, I need you to wait for the next bus. I've radioed for a replacement. It turned around, and I saw Jason's face, except the smile was too wide and the eyes didn't blink. But I always ride this bus. This is my bus. My stop. My seat. Not tonight. Please exit. For a long moment, it just stared at me. Then Jason's face began to shift, the features sliding like melting wax. The smile grew wider still, stretching beyond the boundaries of human anatomy. You know, Fawn Daniel, the last driver would have let me stay. Get off my bus. It laughed, and the sound was layers of voices speaking in unison. Children, adults, elderly people, all laughing together in a horrible chorus. Then it walked back down the aisle and descended the steps. As it reached the door, it looked back at me one final time. See you soon, driver. Everyone rides eventually. The doors closed, and I peeled out of that stop faster than I'd ever moved the bus before. I called Rita immediately, my voice shaking so badly I could barely speak. You did right, she said when I finished the story. Trust your gut. Always. That's the most important rule, Daniel. These things can look like anyone, be anyone, but they can't fool that deep instinct that knows when something's predator and not prey. I picked up the real Jason at his tutoring session 2 hours later. He was confused about why I called for him to wait. Said he'd been inside the whole time. I apologized, blaming a mix-up in the schedule, and didn't tell him what had tried to board my bus wearing his face. That night, I sat in my apartment and reviewed Rita's map again, running my fingers over the worn paper and handwritten warnings. These rules weren't arbitrary superstitions. They were a survival guide written in the blood and terror of drivers who'd gone before me, who'd learned what lurked in the Texas darkness and paid the price for that knowledge. I was beginning to understand that Route 47 wasn't just a job. It was a pact with forces that existed in the margins of reality, and the rules were the terms of that pact. Break them, and the protection was void. Follow them, and you might just make it through another night. I'd become accustomed to the supernatural elements of Route 47. Strange as it sounds, the ghost passengers and shape-shifting entities had become predictable in their own way. They followed patterns, adhered to certain laws, even if those laws weren't ones taught in any textbook. But humans? Humans were capable of a chaos that no supernatural entity could match. The first time I truly understood this was a January evening, bitter cold and threatening snow. I picked up a woman at the community college stop, someone I'd never seen before. She was maybe 40, dressed in expensive clothing that seemed out of place in rural Texas, a tailored coat, designer boots, jewelry that caught the light. She climbed aboard and stood at the front, staring at me with an intensity that immediately set me on edge. "You're the night driver," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Please take a seat." She didn't move. "How long have you been driving this route?" "About 4 months." "Ma'am, I really need you to sit down so we can. Do you see them?" She leaned closer, and I could smell expensive perfume mixed with something else, something sharp and chemical. The others. The ones who aren't really here. My stomach tightened. Passengers weren't supposed to acknowledge what happened on these routes. It was an unspoken agreement. We all pretended the strange things were normal, and normal kept us safe. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Her smile was predatory. "I've been studying these roads for 3 years. My daughter disappeared on a school bus in this county. They said she ran away, but I know better. She's still here, riding the routes, looking for a way home. And you're going to help me find her." "Ma'am, I'm very sorry about your daughter, but I'm just a bus driver. I can't." She pulled out a photograph and shoved it in my face. A teenage girl, maybe 16, with dark hair and a bright smile. Her name was Melissa. She was last seen on the night route 3 years ago. The driver at the time said she got off at her stop, but she never made it home. 10 steps from a bus to her front door, and she vanished. "Tell me you haven't seen her." I looked at the photograph more carefully, and my blood ran cold. I had seen her, or something that looked like her. She appeared in my peripheral vision sometimes, sitting in different seats, always with that same smile. But she never quite solidified, never became fully present. Just another passenger in the collection of specters that haunted Route 47. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "I've never seen anyone matching her description." The woman's face twisted with rage. "Liar. You drivers all protect each other. Keep the secrets. My daughter is trapped somewhere between here and wherever the hell that bus takes people, and you won't help." She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. I jerked the bus to a stop and stood, pulling free from her grip. "Ma'am, you need to calm down, or I will call the authorities." "Call them. They won't believe you. They never believe anyone about what happens on these routes." She was screaming now, tears streaming down her face. "My baby is lost in whatever nightmare you drivers have made a deal with, and nobody will help me get her back." It took 20 minutes and a sheriff's deputy to get her off my bus. She was still screaming as they led her away. Threats and pleas mixed together in a horrible litany. I learned later that she'd been banned from the bus system for harassing drivers, that she'd attacked 2 other night drivers before me, always with the same accusations and desperate demands. But here's the thing that kept me awake for nights afterward. She was right. I'd seen her daughter, and whatever Melissa had become, she wasn't coming home. The encounter shook me more than any supernatural event had. The supernatural was frightening, yes, but there was a distance to it, an otherness that allowed me to categorize it as something separate from myself. But that mother's grief, her rage, her desperate love, that was purely human and infinitely more disturbing because I could understand it completely. 2 weeks later, I picked up a parent and child at one of my regular stops. The father, who introduced himself as Robert, sat near the front while his 7-year-old son, Tyler, bounced excitedly in the seat behind him. They were heading to a special Saturday evening science program at the community college. Tyler was talkative in the way only 7-year-olds can be, firing off questions faster than I could answer them. "Mr. Driver, do you like driving the bus at night? Isn't it scary? Have you ever seen a mountain lion? My teacher says there are mountain lions in Texas. Do you think they'd attack a bus?" "Tyler, hush," his father said, but there was affection in his voice. "Let Mr. Reeves concentrate on driving. It's fine," I assured him. I liked the company. For the first 20 minutes, it was pleasant. Just a normal father and son, excited about an educational program. Then Tyler asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Driver, why is that lady in the back of the bus crying?" I glanced in the rearview mirror. The back seats were empty except for Tyler, who had turned around to look behind him. "There's nobody there, buddy. Maybe you heard the wind." "No, she's right there. She's wearing a white dress, and she's crying. Can't you see her?" Robert turned to look, then quickly turned back, his face pale. "Tyler," eyes forward. "Don't look at her." The tone in his voice made my hands tighten on the wheel. "You see her too. Drive faster," Robert said quietly. "Please, just get us to the college." But Tyler wasn't listening. He'd unbuckled his seatbelt and was standing up, reaching toward the back of the bus. "She's sad. She wants help. Daddy, we should help her." "Tyler, sit down." Robert lunged for his son, but the boy slipped past him, walking down the aisle toward the empty seats where he claimed to see a crying woman. I could feel the temperature dropping, that familiar cold that announced something was wrong. "Tyler, you need to sit down right now. She's showing me something," Tyler said, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. "Pictures in her hands. Lots of pictures. They're all of O." He stopped walking. His small body went rigid, and when he turned to look at his father, his eyes were too wide, too aware. "Daddy, she died in a car accident. She was supposed to get married. She's showing me the wedding dress she never got to wear. She's showing me her fiancé, except he's old now, and he doesn't remember her anymore, and she's so sad because she can't leave this road where she died." Robert was out of his seat now, moving toward his son with his arms outstretched. "Tyler, baby, come back here. Don't look at the pictures." But Tyler was transfixed, his gaze fixed on something only he could see. "She says lots of people die on these roads. She says they all get stuck riding the buses forever, looking for their stops, trying to get home. She says," his voice broke, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She says I'm going to die too. She says she can see it. She says in 3 years, there's going to be an accident and..." "Enough." Robert's roar filled the bus. He grabbed Tyler and hauled him back toward the front, practically throwing himself and his son into their seat. "We're getting off. Stop the bus. Now." "Sir, we're between stops. I can't. I don't care about your goddamn rules. Stop this bus or I'm pulling the emergency exit." I pulled over immediately, violating yet another of Rita's rules about stopping in undesignated areas. Robert bundled his sobbing son out of the bus, not even waiting for me to fully open the doors. They stood on the dark roadside, Robert holding Tyler close and pulling out his phone to call someone for a ride. Before I closed the doors, Robert looked up at me. "You people should be shut down. Whatever deal you've made with this place, whatever you've invited onto these buses, it's not worth it. You're exposing innocent people to things that destroy them." I wanted to argue, to defend myself and the service we provided. But looking at Tyler's small form shaking in his father's arms, I couldn't find the words. Robert was right. We were complicit in something terrible. And the worst part was that we kept it running because it was easier than confronting what these roads really were. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Tyler was pointing at my bus, saying something to his father. And there, in the back window, I could see her for just a moment. A woman in a white dress, her face a mask of sorrow, her hand pressed against the glass as if trying to break through. The human encounters continued, each one worse than the last. There was the college student who boarded my bus and spent the entire ride whispering to someone who wasn't there, responding to questions I couldn't hear with increasing agitation. When I finally reached her stop, she turned to me and said, "He told me to tell you that your time is running out. He said you'll understand when a black dog appears." There was the elderly man who rode to visit his wife at a nursing home every Thursday. He seemed perfectly normal until the night he stood up mid-route and announced, "I just realized we're all dead. We died years ago, and this bus is taking us to judgment. That's why we see the others, isn't it? We're just like them now." There was the teenage girl who got on at her usual stop but spent the entire ride scratching symbols into the back of the seat in front of her with her fingernails. When I confronted her about the damage, she showed me her bloodied fingers and said, "They told me to write warnings. They said the next driver needs to know what's coming. They said Route 47 is waking up." But the encounter that finally broke something inside me happened on a February night, exactly 5 months after I'd started driving Route 47. I picked up a man at the community college, someone who looked to be in his 50s with graying hair and a kind face. He sat directly behind me and immediately struck up a conversation. His name was William, and he was taking a computer skills class to improve his job prospects. We talked about normal things, his grandchildren, the weather, his plans to take his wife on a cruise for their anniversary. It was such a relief to have a normal conversation that I let my guard down. I didn't notice that we'd been talking for nearly 40 minutes, far longer than his ride should have taken. I didn't notice that we'd passed his stop 3 times. I didn't notice that his reflection in the rearview mirror was slightly wrong, delayed by a fraction of a second from his actual movements. I only noticed when he said, "You know, Daniel, you're going to die on this route." My blood turned to ice. "Excuse me. Not tonight, not next week, but soon. I've seen it. We've all seen it." His voice remained conversational, friendly even. There's something growing in the darkness out here, something that's been feeding on the fear and death and desperation of everyone who's traveled these roads. It's almost strong enough to break free of the patterns, the rules. When it does, it's going to take one of the drivers as a final offering. And you're the one it's chosen. I pulled the bus over and turned to face him fully. The seat behind me was empty. It had been empty the entire time. But his voice continued, coming from all around me, from the very air itself. "You're marked, Daniel Reeves. The black dog is coming for you. And when it arrives, all the rules in the world won't save you." Then silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I sat there for 10 minutes, shaking, before I could gather the courage to continue driving. I called Rita the next morning and told her I was quitting. She listened quietly, then said, "I understand. But Daniel, you need to know something. The entity that spoke to you last night, it wasn't lying about being chosen. If you quit now, it'll just follow you. These things don't let go once they've marked someone. The only way forward is through. Through to what? Through to the end of your contract. 6 months. That's the deal every night driver makes, whether they know it or not. 6 months on Route 47, and then you're free. Leave before that, and you carry the darkness with you forever." I had 1 month left. 30 more nights of driving through a nightmare that was no longer content to just observe. 30 more nights before whatever William, or the thing pretending to be William, had warned me about would come to claim its due. The human encounters had taught me something the supernatural ones never could. The real horror wasn't the ghosts or the shapeshifters or the impossible things that defied reality. The real horror was that humans could perceive these things, could be changed by them, could be driven to madness or rage or despair by the knowledge that reality was far thinner and more breakable than we've been taught. We weren't protected by our humanity. We were exposed by it, vulnerable in ways the supernatural entities could never be. They were adapted to this nightmare. We were just visitors, and every day we stayed made us a little less human and a little more like the things we encountered in the dark. I had 1 month to survive. 1 month until the black dog arrived. 1 month to hold on to whatever fragments of my sanity remained. And I had a terrible feeling that it was going to be the longest month of my life. March arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if Texas itself was holding its breath. I had 3 weeks left on my contract, and the encounters had intensified to the point where I barely distinguished between the supernatural and the real anymore. Every passenger was suspect. Every shadow held potential threat. Sleep came in fractured intervals, filled with dreams of endless roads and buses that drove themselves into oblivion. Rita noticed the toll it was taking. She pulled me aside one Monday afternoon, her weathered face creased with concern. "You look like hell, Daniel." "Feel like it too. The last stretch is always the hardest. The entity that's marked you, it knows your time is almost up. It'll try to break you before you finish, make you quit or violate the rules. Don't let it win." "What exactly am I dealing with?" I asked, exhaustion making me blunt. "What is the black dog?" Rita's expression darkened. "It's old. Older than Texas. Older than any human settlement here. The indigenous peoples had stories about it. A spirit that followed the paths of death, that fed on the final moments of the dying. When the roads were built, it adapted, found new paths to follow. Every few years, it chooses a driver, usually someone sensitive, someone who can see more than they should. It tests them, breaks them down, and then..." She trailed off. "Then what?" "Then it rides them, uses them as a vessel to interact with the physical world more directly. The drivers who've been taken, they don't die, but they're not really alive either. They become conduits for something that should never touch our reality." I thought about the driver in the care facility, the one who hadn't spoken coherently in 3 years. "How do I stop it?" "You don't stop it. You survive it. Complete your contract. Follow every rule perfectly, and maintain your humanity. That last part is the hardest. The black dog wants you to become like it. Cold, predatory, disconnected from human emotion. It feeds on isolation and fear. Don't give it that power." But maintaining humanity was easier said than done when reality itself had become unreliable. That night, I started my route with 2 passengers, both college students I'd driven dozens of times. By the time we reached the second stop, there were 7 people on the bus, though I'd made no additional pickups. The 5 extras sat perfectly still, their faces blurred like photographs taken with a shaky hand, and neither of the real passengers seemed to notice them. At mile marker 23, where the faceless hitchhiker usually stood, the entire road was lined with figures. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all standing in perfect stillness, all watching as I drove past. My high beams illuminated them in stark detail. Men, women, children, all wearing clothes from different eras, all bearing the unmistakable mark of death in their too pale skin and too empty eyes. They were gathering. Whatever was coming, they knew about it. They were assembling to witness. The ghost stops became more frequent, occurring every few miles. But instead of the usual 30-second pause, they lasted longer each time. During one, I counted 5 full minutes where the bus simply refused to move, no matter what I did. My passengers, a mother and her teenage daughter, sat in tense silence, not acknowledging what was happening, but clearly aware that something was wrong. "We're moving again," I announced when the bus finally lurched forward, trying to inject normalcy into my voice. The daughter leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves, Why are there handprints all over the windows? Like someone's been pressing against them from outside. I looked. She was right. The windows were covered in prints. Small ones, large ones, prints with too many fingers or too few. They appeared as we watched, blooming across the glass like frost crystals, except each one left a greasy residue behind. Condensation, I lied. The temperature differential creates. They're on the outside of the windows, the daughter interrupted. We're driving 50 miles per hour on an empty road. How is someone putting handprints on the outside? Her mother pulled her back. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. Smart woman. She understood the first rule of riding Route 47. Witness, but don't engage. The prints remained for the rest of that night. Dozens of hands pressed against every window, all moving slowly downward, as if whatever was making them was sliding along the side of the bus. When I returned to the depot, maintenance found the prints had etched themselves into the glass. They had to replace every window on the bus. With 2 weeks left, the black dog made its first appearance. I was driving the late run, well past midnight, with no passengers. The roads were empty, the kind of empty that feels hostile, like the world has been abandoned and you're the only one who hasn't gotten the memo. I was navigating a particularly isolated stretch when I saw it in my headlights. A dog stood in the middle of the road. Except calling a dog was like calling a hurricane a breeze. Technically accurate, but missing the essential truth. It was massive, easily the size of a small horse, with fur so black it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its eyes glowed with a red luminescence that hurt to look at. I slammed on the brakes, and the bus screeched to a halt 20 feet from the creature. It didn't move, didn't flinch at the sound or the lights. It just stared at me with those burning eyes, and I felt its attention like a physical weight crushing down on my chest. Then it smiled. Its mouth opened far too wide, revealing rows of teeth that had nothing to do with canine anatomy. And it smiled at me with an intelligence that was ancient and hungry and utterly alien. My radio crackled to life, though I hadn't touched it. Rita's voice came through, distorted and breaking. Daniel, if you're hearing this, you've encountered it. Do not, I repeat, do not leave the bus. Do not speak to it. Do not acknowledge it. Put the bus in reverse and back away slowly. The rules still apply. It cannot board without an invitation. The black dog tilted its head, listening to Rita's voice. Then it laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal and the last breath of dying things. It turned away from me and loped off the road, disappearing into the darkness in seconds. But I knew it wasn't gone. I could feel it pacing alongside the bus for the rest of the night, always just beyond the reach of my headlights, keeping perfect pace with my speed. Watching, waiting. The next 2 weeks were a descent into a waking nightmare. The black dog appeared every night, sometimes on the road, sometimes reflected in windows, sometimes as just a shadow that moved wrong. It never tried to board, but its presence was a constant pressure, wearing down my mental defenses through sheer persistence. The other phenomena intensified as well. Ghost passengers appeared with increasing solidity, to the point where real passengers would try to strike up conversations with them before realizing something was wrong. The ghost stops lasted longer. The rules became harder to follow as reality itself seemed to bend around me. I started losing time. I'd blink and realize an hour had passed with no memory of driving it. I find myself at stops I didn't remember making, picking up passengers I didn't recognize. My hands on the wheel didn't always feel like my hands. Rita checked in on me constantly, but even her reassurances felt distant, like they were coming from very far away. You're almost there, Daniel. 5 more days, then 4, then 3. Hold on. But I wasn't sure there was anything left to hold on to. The person I had been before Route 47 felt like a distant memory, someone naive and foolish who thought reality had rules and boundaries. I'd seen too much. I knew too much. And worst of all, I was beginning to understand it. The logic of the supernatural, The patterns and the chaos. The terrible sense it all made when you stopped trying to force it into human frameworks. I was changing, becoming something else, something adapted to this environment. And the black dog knew it. The final night arrived on March 28th, 6 months to the day since I'd started driving Route 47. Rita met me at the depot before my shift, her expression grave. "This is it," she said. "Complete tonight's route, return the bus, and you're free. The contract ends. The mark releases you. And if I don't make it, then you become like the others, a permanent resident of these roads, neither living nor dead, just another echo in the darkness." She gripped my shoulder. "But that's not going to happen. You're stronger than the ones who failed. You followed the rules, maintained your humanity. Tonight is just one more shift." But we both knew it was more than that. The black dog had been waiting for this night, planning for it. This was a final test. The route started normally, or as normal as anything on Route 47 could be. I picked up my passengers at the usual stops, familiar faces, people I'd driven dozens of times. They seemed nervous, though they didn't say why. Maybe they could sense that something was different about tonight, that the air itself felt charged with anticipation. Everything went smoothly until I reached mile marker 47, the same number as my route. I'd driven past this marker countless times without incident. But tonight the bus slowed of its own accord and stopped. Not at the side of the road, but in the middle of it, blocking both lanes. The engine died. The lights died. My radio died. Everything went dark and silent except for the sound of my passengers breathing in sudden fear. Then, from outside, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, the sound of something very large walking on pavement. The black dog was circling the bus. "Nobody move," I whispered. "Nobody make a sound." The footsteps continued their circuit, round and round the bus. With each pass, I could feel the temperature dropping. My passenger's breath became visible in the air. Frost began forming on the inside of the windows. Not the handprints from before, but intricate patterns that looked like screaming faces. My radio crackled to life with no power source. The voice that came through wasn't Rita's. It was William's, the man who'd warned me, who'd never really been there at all. "Hello, Daniel. Your time is up. 6 months of testing, 6 months of observation, and now the moment of truth. Will you open the door and let me in? Or will you watch as I take your passengers one by one until you have no choice?" "Go to hell," I managed through chattering teeth. The laughter that came through the radio was joined by laughter from outside, from all around us. The black dog had brought friends, the legion of dead spirits that haunted these roads, all gathered for this final confrontation. "You've learned our rules so well," the voice continued. "You follow them perfectly. But here's the secret, Daniel. The rules were never meant to protect you. They were meant to train you, to shape you, to prepare you for this moment. You've been initiated into our world, and now you belong to it. Open the door. Accept your place. Join us." One of my passengers, a college student named Jennifer, started sobbing. "Please, just do what it says. I can see them out there. There are hundreds of them. They're going to tear us apart." "No," I said, though my hand was moving toward the door lever against my will. "The rules are protection. They can't board without invitation. We just have to wait." "Wait for what?" another passenger demanded. "We're going to die out here." The black dog's footsteps stopped. In the terrible silence that followed, I heard it speak without using the radio, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "You're right. I cannot board without invitation. But your passengers can invite me. All it takes is one of them opening the emergency exit, and I flood in. How long do you think their fear will let them wait?" I looked in the rearview mirror and saw my passengers staring at the emergency exit at the back of the bus. I saw the calculation in their eyes, the animal panic that was overriding rational thought. They were going to open it. They were going to let it in to save themselves. "Listen to me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "That thing feeds on fear and isolation. It wants us to turn on each other, to abandon our humanity. If we do that, we've already lost. The rules aren't just about protection. They're about maintaining who we are. Stay human. Stay together. Trust each other. Trust. Jennifer laughed hysterically. How can we trust anything in this nightmare? And that's when I understood. That's when the final piece fell into place. Rita had said the hardest part was maintaining humanity. And I thought she meant not going crazy, not becoming traumatized. But it was deeper than that. Humanity wasn't about sanity or normalcy. It was about connection, empathy, the choice to care about others, even when every instinct screamed for self-preservation. The black dog wanted isolation. It wanted me alone, cut off, transformed into something solitary and predatory like itself. But I wasn't alone. I had passengers who needed me. I had Rita waiting back at the depot. I had a life beyond these roads that was worth fighting for. I stood up and faced my passengers. My name is Daniel Reeves. 6 months ago, I took this job thinking it was just a bus route. I was wrong. This route is a gateway to something dark and old and hungry. But it only has power if we give it that power. If we choose fear over hope, isolation over connection, despair over courage. I'm choosing to stay human. I'm asking you to make the same choice. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jennifer stood up. My name is Jennifer Martinez. I'm a nursing student. I want to help people. I choose to stay human too. One by one, my passengers stood and introduced themselves, reclaiming their identities, their humanity, in the face of the darkness. And as they did, the frost on the windows began to recede. The temperature began to rise. The presence outside began to weaken. The voice came through the radio one final time, now sounding distant and frustrated. This isn't over, Daniel Reeves. There will be other drivers, other routes. We are patient, and the darkness is always hungry. Maybe, I said, but not tonight, and not me. The bus roared back to life. The lights flashed on. The footsteps outside faded away into silence. I put the bus in gear and completed my route, dropping off each passenger at their designated stop. Every one of them thanked me as they left, and there was an understanding in their eyes. We'd shared something profound, survived something that would mark us forever. When I returned to the depot, Rita was waiting. She looked at me carefully, searching my face, and then smiled. You made it. Truly made it. Not just survived. You beat it. Did I? It said there would be other drivers. There will be. There always are. But you broke its pattern, Daniel. You didn't just follow the rules. You understood them. You maintained your humanity, not through isolation, but through connection. That's never happened before. You've changed the game. I turned in my resignation that night, effective immediately. My contract was complete, my obligation fulfilled. The mark released me, and I felt its departure like a weight lifting from my soul. But I'd be lying if I said I was unchanged. Even now, months later, I see things in the darkness that others don't. I notice the wrong shadows, the impossible movements, the spaces between reality where things that shouldn't exist make their homes. Route 47 marked me in ways I'm still discovering. Yet I don't regret it. I learned something profound on those haunted roads. Humanity is a choice we make every day, in every moment. It's not a state of being, but an act of will. In the face of the inexplicable and terrifying, we can choose to remain compassionate, connected, and brave. That choice is our greatest defense against the darkness. Sometimes, late at night, I'll see a school bus pass on a distant road and wonder who's driving it, what they're encountering, whether they'll make the same choice I did. And I hope, desperately, that they will. Because there are things out there in the darkness, things that want us isolated and afraid. But there's also something stronger, the stubborn, beautiful, defying humanity that refuses to surrender even when confronted by the impossible. My name is Daniel Reeves. I was a night shift bus driver on Route 47 in rural Texas. I survived 6 months of supernatural horror by choosing to stay human. And if you're out there, driving your own version of Route 47, facing your own darkness, know this: you're not alone. We're all connected by our shared humanity, and that connection is stronger than any force that seeks to tear us apart. The road is long, and the night is dark, but we drive on, together.